Equinox 24. Since 2015, it's been my annual getaway for a weekend of camping, meeting up with friends, and of course, a silly amount of distance and aching muscles. Quite frankly, it's the greatest foot race on earth in my opinion. In the past we've had blazing heat, torrential rains, and superhuman feats of endurance. 2019 was of course no different, and 2020 had us all set to return to our favourite field in Grantham. 2020 was also to be the much anticipated launch of Equinox 24's shiny new sister event, Solstice 24. A new decade of running was looking bright. But then...
There now follows a ministerial broadcast from the Prime Minister.
Good evening. The coronavirus is the biggest threat this country has faced for decades, and this country is not alone. All over the world we're seeing the devastating impact of this invisible killer.
It seemed that a virus of unknown origin had been causing issues over in China. Never mind, China is quite far away from most of us. Then people got a bit ill on that cruise ship. Oh well, these things happen. Then an estimated 4.6 million deaths happened, 150,000 of those being in the UK. As life imitated art, it seemed that the snap event of the Infinity Gauntlet might just be coming true. Never fear though, our fearless leaders had us covered.
That I'm shaking hands continuously. I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody. You'll be pleased to know, and I continue to shake hands. And I think it's very important that people obviously can make up their own minds. I think that Matt has said that people must make up their own minds, but I think the scientific evidence is, well, I'll hand over to the experts, but our judgment is wash. Washing your hands is the crucial thing. Yes.
Okay, well, at least over in the US they were thinking outside the box.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that? By injection inside or almost a cleaning, because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number on the lungs, so it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with, but it sounds interesting to me.
Soon we were all in lockdown. Thankfully, I already had a suitable face mask. In the end, we came up with an R number. Then a traffic light system. Then a threat severity level system, followed by the mandatory rules. You had to work from home unless you couldn't. But you could if you were a bus driver, but you shouldn't, especially as people shouldn't be on the bus anyway. You definitely couldn't meet up with another household to see your mum, but packing onto the beach with strangers was okay. You should get fresh air, but don't, because you'll be fined. You could meet your parents in the park, but only one of them for some reason, so pick your favourite. There was the fantastic Eat Out to Help Out scheme, basically a wide-scale plan to see if cramming everyone into Nando's for half-price meals would resolve the country's issues. Finally, the good news came that we could all be together for Christmas for 1 week. Then a few hours later that became a crime against the state. If you were a commoner. But you definitely could go for a walk. Unless you were in Derbyshire and the police would send the stealth drones after you. You could definitely be a teacher, teaching a class of 30, but definitely couldn't go to see your neighbours' children, even if they were in your class. Trips to Barnard Castle were still on though, as long as you were feeling particularly unwell, partially sighted driving with your child in the back. It only makes sense after all. Quite frankly, my favourite castle lies elsewhere. One thing was for sure, a vaccine was our best hope if we ever wanted to see mass participation events again. In the meantime, the great sporting events of the world fell one by one. My local 10k, then the local half marathon, the London Marathon, and beyond. It seemed that the virus was determined to disrupt the sporting calendar, as well as everything else. Sadly, the deaths kept coming and the bodies started to pile up. There was also the question of how the virus of unknown origin even happened in the first place. Perhaps it was that secret lab, that dodgy soup I had at that roadside cafe, or perhaps that bag of pangolins I bought back as souvenirs from that Far East business trip. We just don't know. Either way, 2020 was quickly advancing to the status of serious dumpster fire at a rate of knots. It's important to remember that at this point in time, a vaccine was still not rolled out at scale. By the time that you see this video, the events and impact of the 2020 pandemic may seem like a distant memory, perhaps as the Spanish flu does to my generation. Nevertheless, it did happen and a lot of sacrifices were made. If things already look pretty bleak, perhaps one of the saddest sporting videos of 2020 was yet to emerge. On the 26th of March, race organiser Laura made the unwelcome announcement we perhaps all knew was coming, the cancellation of Solstice 24, and in all probability, Equinox 2020 to follow.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to do a quick video just really to say thank you. We sent out the email today with the options for the cancellation options for Solstice 24. And I've just been looking through some of the responses and there's some really lovely comments on there, so I just wanted to say a massive thank you. Oh, it's quite emotional, but we are completely gutted that we can't put that event on for you. We'd worked really hard and you know we were really trying our very best to make it amazing, and we are really sad that we've had to cancel. And I was quite terrified really of sending out the emails cancelling it to everybody. Sometimes, especially behind a keyboard, people can be quite abrupt and a bit feisty about things that aren't necessarily the way they'd want them to be. So after being quite worried about sending it out, we've just had so many lovely comments of support, so thank you. It really does mean a lot to us, and we'll do absolutely everything we can to make Equinox awesome. Fingers crossed that will go ahead, and if not, then next year we'll really be pushing for an amazing year of events. But yeah, fingers crossed we'll see you at Equinox, and a massive thank you for those of you who've opted to do the virtual event as well, because again that really will help and it does make a big difference. So I know times are tough for lots of people, health wise, coping with work and the kids at home, and financially. More than anything, we completely understand how difficult it is when everything that you've kind of based your world around is falling apart a little bit. So yeah, we really do appreciate those messages and comments and all of your just cooperation and just, you know, being flexible with the whole thing. So a big thank you, and stay well, and we'll hopefully see a lot of you in September. Cheers.
It was soon clear that Solstice 24 2020 was dead. The virtual event had been a welcome addition to many runners' calendars, but the virus of unknown origin had put an end to the Solstice 24 dream before it had even begun, at least for now. In the end, Equinox 24 2020 was also not to be, instead substituted by the very much welcomed virtual event. We ran, we camped in our gardens, we conquered at a social distance, but the Equinox 24 family were a far-flung set of isolated runners by this point. I'm obviously not privy to the details of cancelling two major events, but you can be sure that it came at a substantial financial and mental cost to the organising team. The runners, however, did vow to return. Things had started to escalate. People suddenly felt compelled to stock hundreds of toilet rolls in their house, despite toilet rolls being unrelated to the symptoms of the virus of unknown origin. Then the unthinkable happened that directly threatened the running community, the Great Haribo shortage. It will long be remembered as a dark period in our history. Parents turned against their children, brother against brother, for the last remaining bags of Haribo. The Battle of the Tanfastics culminated in an all-out war in the streets. Okay, it didn't get that bad, but I assure you, it was of a concern. In the end, a vaccine rollout had begun after numerous lockdowns. Green shoots of normality were beginning to return. The Equinox 24 family collectively held its breath once more as the agonising wait for news on Equinox 24-21 continued. Would it be postponed again? Would it be all out cancelled? If not at Equinox 24, where else am I going to seriously damage my knees? But I expect that you know the next page of the story. The Equinox 24 community held its breath. It was on. Yes, we would all be back. Now, if only we had trained. It was clear that the 2021 edition of Equinox 24 was going to be a little bit different to usual. This was a time when vaccinations were still rolling out. Most runners had been unable to get in any races before Equinox, and the ability to assemble teams was not realistic due to social distancing rules. Nevertheless, this was still Equinox 24. Friday always has a relaxed feeling around the site as runners set up camp. Equinox 2021 would be extra special this year, as Daddy's promise to take his 19-month-old daughter finally came true. In truth, she was of little help setting up the tent, but she was having fun. She also met a horse for the first time, so her Equinox 24 was already a winner. Yes, the glamping tents were back. Teams were socialising. A dog came to say hello. Finally, that Equinox feeling was building. Hello? Hello there? If you're new to Equinox 24, Friday is very much the socialising day of the event. Nobody's legs are broken yet, and nobody has collapsed from exhaustion, which allows for an enjoyable evening. You're free to roam the event HQ, expect to find a decent array of race support stalls. Everything from socks, extra base layers and nutrition are available here. Also, in a rather appropriate note of foreshadowing, the first aiders. I'll be seeing these guys later. Of course, you can't talk about Equinox 24 without mentioning the food and drink. The beer bus is always a popular choice and doing a good trade. I venture upstairs to admire the view.
Hey up! You missed the words, I'm sorry, they've been on and finished now.
It's worth mentioning again that the event did seem quieter this year, but that wasn't a bad thing. With many people simply not able to prepare for an event like Equinox, early doubts that the event would even run at all, and job security issues for many, it was only to be expected. Still, lots of us made it. Good Spuds were also doing a good trade, and I can confirm that the food there was spot on. I was even treated to extra butter at no extra cost.
I got faith in you. There's one cheese and beans. No worries.
Pop Top Kitchen is another of my go-to favourites of the event, and is also popular with the other runners. Why not try some grilled cheese, the wood-fired pizza, or even fish and chips? For many, this was the first time that they had left the house in any meaningful way in a long time. More than ever, Equinox 24 felt like a special occasion. The Detroits played on, and for a short while, thoughts of the chaos of 2020 were falling away for many. The new event clothing was on show, and things were returning to normal. because sumos and dinosaurs are the new norm for Friday night now apparently. As is tradition on the Friday night, the beer run takes place. After a swift drink, it's a case of one lap around the camping field. Sumos, dinosaurs and unicorns are all welcome. The mini race is surprisingly competitive, and there's a lot of pride in taking the top spots. There's also a lot to be said for simply getting round. Of course, places mean prizes. There are podium positions available in the male and female categories.
Second place, it's Ross. And I don't know if this is going to be his only first place podium this weekend. I know he's got the solo competition in his sights, but first place goes to Adam Holland. Pose for your photos, boys. Share the trophy. 1 week on, 1 week off. And in second place, we've got Marie. And in first place, the female winner of the 2021 beer is Maddie. Thank you so much, everyone. The party doesn't stop yet. The beer buzz, the music, the food is still open till 11. And after 11, it's time for bed. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
With the evening winding down, runners' thoughts turn to tomorrow's main events. The Saturday morning kicks off with the children's race. My daughter is raring to go back at the tent.
Right. Good enough. Yeah? Good enough.
It's not long before we join the huddled masses. The runners get off to a great start, and it really feels like the Equinox 24 event is getting into gear now. This was actually the first time that my daughter had ever seen a crowd. As you can imagine, being brought up for most of your life in lockdown isn't exactly a normal start in life. I must say though that the support was exceptional. And yes, we may not have crossed the start line for a couple of minutes, but we were still having fun. To be honest, this wasn't far off my top speed all day. Others delivered a little bit more in the way of speed. I have to say, my daughter was delighted with her finisher's medal. Hopefully, it will be the first of many. As the clock ticks down to the start of Equinox 24, there's a window of opportunity to wish your fellow runners good luck. Then the real fun begins. In the run-up to the event, I had 3 chest infections, a return to full-time asthma medication after 18 years, and a suspected torn calf muscle. In terms of performance, this was certainly not going to be a high-scoring year for myself. And I have a feeling that many others had come into the event this year with similar issues due to the lockdown. Pretty much everyone I spoke to would have done well to have been resting up rather than taking on a 24-hour running event. As we lined up, I think each and every one of us appreciated how lucky we were to finally be at the start line. After so much waiting, it just felt good to be running again. The course itself remained unchanged from previous years, a 10k loop packed with features and stunning views. The start to 1 kilometre sees you pass through the main camp. If this is your first experience of ultramarathon running, then you will never forget it. It somehow feels like well-wishers waving off relatives at the launch of a new ship, possibly the Titanic. Either way, that first kilometre is a good time to start off slow and get the feel of the temperature and the grass below. Already the day is heating up quite nicely. All sorts take part in Equinox 24, and I have to say there really is no one shape, size or experience level. Looking around, you'll see some that are new to the event, some returning runners, some look sporty, others not so much. Some run alone, others bring a large contingent of clubmates for support. So if you are looking for your first longer distance race, I can't recommend Equinox 24 highly enough. You're bound to fit in here somewhere. With the first kilometre down, you're already heading up the first hill of the event that runs alongside the duck pond. My personal tip is not to be tempted to go too fast too early up this one, it's longer than it looks. Kilometre 2 is a mix of grass leading down to your choice of either field or stony path. It's a fairly easy section of the course by day, but beware of the rabbit holes and uneven ground by night. This is one of the many sections I've fallen over in before now. Oh, and Mr. Blobby was here.
Good work, Blobby. Good work, keep that. Oh, lovely.
Kilometre 3 is perhaps the closest thing you'll get to a flat road race. Follow the stony path and bear left. It can be tempting to fly down here with a clear track ahead, but hold back on lap 1. You'll thank yourself by the time you get to the end of the lap. Kilometre 4 is a transitional step in my opinion, a change of scenery from the exposed sun of the field, right at the crossroads, enjoy some shade from the trees and finally end the kilometre by crossing the bridge. On reflection, this may be my favourite section. It's scenic and there is potential for some speed here later on in the race if you have the legs for it due to the downhill. But you won't be seeing any downhills for a while. Kilometre 5 is the rise of not that hill, a pure kilometre of climb that only ever seems to get steeper. To add insult to injury, you also get to see the enjoyment on the faces of those coming back down the hill. This is an ideal place for a marshal point. And there is one. The course progresses onwards to the next marshal point at the top of the hill, and lovingly known as the disco by the regulars. Expect some drinks and some belting music later on. I'm in absolutely no rush this year with my general health, so happy to pick up a water. Also, I know what's coming next. Kilometre 7 is the most iconic of the course. First, going down the rather steep descent of the hill. If you have any calf issues, take this one slowly. This section is particularly tricky during the night stage. I've fallen on this section before now. I swear those rabbits build their holes there on purpose. Of course, what goes down must go up. You're at that hill, the course's most talked about feature. On camera, it looks almost tame. In real life though, it's an unforgiving beast that sets to stop your progress. It's one of those that you really have to experience for yourself, but be assured, very few run this section in any meaningful way by the night stage. That hasn't stopped the organisers adding a speed tracker to that hill though. Almost a cruel joke, I feel. The good news is that you're now into kilometre 8, a decent downhill stretch into the knobbly field. Make up time on the concrete path if you can, but I would urge caution once you get into the downhill of the field. In wet conditions, this section can be particularly intimidating on the ankles. Yet again, this has been a falling place for myself in past years. To be fair though, I've fallen over on a lot of this course. Kilometre 9 sees you climb gently back up to the crossroads. At this point you'll be feeling good about yourself. Food and drink back at the camp are not far away. That can mean only one thing: the final kilometre around the camping field. Depending on the year, the field can throw up a few bumps. On a good year, this is a really nice section to run through, plenty of support and good visibility. Take a bow as you reach the end of the lap. How many more will you survive though? The runners in the team pen are waiting eagerly as I peel off for refreshments and a sit down. On a typical year, I try to spend no more than 5 minutes per break so that my muscles don't cool down. I'm getting to the age now where once I stop for too long, I can't easily get going again. I actually find it easier to keep moving. Walking and eating form the main element of my strategy. Out in the changeover pen, the race is hotting up nicely. 2021 was very much a relaxed year for most. Yes, Equinox 24 is technically a race, but realistically, it's a try your best sort of race for most of us. The shadow of the 2020 plague was present, but only in the background. Behind the scenes, the event staff were very much on top of cleaning the shared areas to give the runners the best experience. For many, Equinox 24 2021 felt like a safe place to finally emerge. The team event is an interesting element of Equinox 24. There's a mix of organised club runners, but also a mix of all abilities. The changeover point is the ideal vantage point to watch the suffering and triumphs of individual team runners. It's also a great place to observe the many elaborate wristband handover techniques. Here are a few of my favourites. There's the double hander, the smooth, the reverse handover, the ominous "I've already dropped it", the "this isn't our first rodeo", the "why don't you stand closer", the vertical handover, the aircraft marshal, the waste no time, the "you said this was going to be fun", the surprise attack, and my favourite, the didn't turn up. Back out on the track, runners take the time to enjoy the rest of the afternoon. By early evening, the race is in full swing. Some runners are still putting in relatively fast lap times, whilst others are taking the chance to pace themselves. For those interested in such things, there are live boards showing participants' positions and lap times. A handy resource for those with rivalries and scores to settle with other competitors. There is also on hand help in case of any issues with the timing chips. Of course, the main event is the 24-hour run, but Equinox 24 also hosts the day and night runs. A single lap of the course to claim some extra medals. It's ideal for those wanting to take part in a night run in a safe and well-supported environment. For everyone else, there's plenty of company around Event HQ. Time to socialise and ponder exactly how many hours Mr. Pop Top Kitchen has been on duty. Even if your only aim is to get out of the house and meet up with friends for the weekend of camping, Equinox 24 is an absolute bargain and well worth the entry fee. This is an event that is the very definition of family friendly. It's safe for children, and adults and spectators will find lots to do outside of the running itself, even in a heavily socially restricted year such as the 2021 event. By this point in the evening, I have backache, my legs are falling apart, but I'm still moving. My speed is simply embarrassing, but it all counts. Personally, this year's event was never about the distance, it was always about the taking part. Cliché for sure, but actually true in this case. In 14 hours, I've actually made it to the 90km mark, which I was actually delighted with. Just one more lap would secure the 100k and the bronze pin. It will be this lap to secure at least 100 kilometres in all 6 years I've been running at the event. Incidentally, my best results came back in 2017 and 18, where I secured 15 laps. In 2017, I actually finished with an hour and 20 minutes to spare. Looking back now, it's perhaps my biggest regret I didn't use the time to push for an all-time best. It's always easy to say that now, but I seem to remember my legs had pretty much shut down at that point. As the night wears on, the injury to my calf muscle really starts playing up. From here on out, any running was out of the question. It would just be a case of marching on for as far as I could. Nighttime at Equinox 24 is incredibly peaceful, almost otherworldly. Passers-by nod, share the walk with their stories, and it feels like a good old-fashioned hiking trip at times. It's early in the morning that the disco Marshall Point also comes into its own. There's high-tempo music and pots of sweets to ease the pain. With my gummy watermelon, I head off into the night. Things are taking a turn for the worse though. My legs were cramping up fairly badly by this point, and it was clear that I would have to make a call on the race at the end of the lap. Getting up that hill was an absolute nightmare, and even at a slow walk, my asthma was letting me know that I probably couldn't continue much further safely. It may have been dehydration or some sort of dream, but I took the appearance of this pigeon as a good omen and continued my staggering back to camp. By 4 AM I reached the end of the lap to complete the 100k. Not a bad result by any means considering my current health. I was struck by how quiet the transition pit had become. This year many runners had decided to switch to the solo competition rather than the team event due to the social gathering rules. I have no doubts that the masses will be back in 2022. My breathing was getting worse, but my legs were in an even worse state. The marshals smiled encouragingly, but it's that smile that says, I'm glad that's not me. With 100 kilometres in the bag, I decide to recover at the tent. After a short sit down, I told myself that maybe I am okay to go back out and just stroll a lap. After all, it's what the pigeon would have wanted. I had already decided that I would retire at the end of lap 11, as I was aware enough that I would start to become a distraction for the marshals if I deteriorated any further. The lap started well and I actually felt like I had a bit of a second wind. But that was quite short-lived. By kilometre 8, my legs had well and truly buckled beneath me. Embarrassingly, I had to ask a passing team runner for a bit of help to stand, to which I then fell straight back on the floor. I was able to limp to the crossroads for a sit down on the marshal's chair for a bit, then back to camp, at which I nearly fainted whilst I was picking up my bronze pin due to overexertion. Cue race organiser Laura with a hot chocolate, and the first aiders to check me out. I can honestly say I felt awful. It's perhaps not the ending you were expecting to this video, but that's life. There was no mighty comeback, no ridiculous distance covered this year, but there was a lot of fun. It also served as a firm reminder that ultramarathons certainly aren't easy, and you should always listen to your body when it's telling you that it's broken. I went home pleased with my 11 laps, my daughter thrilled with her medal, and some outstanding performances had emerged by the Sunday lunchtime. Of course, this does all set things up nicely for Equinox 24 2022. We have new reigning champions set to return to defend their titles. 2022 will mark a decade of the Equinox 24 event, and you can be sure it's going to be a good one.